Then the first item on the agenda is with the Granite State Amateur Radio and Aries people. Just by way of introduction, one of these gentlemen, Stan Poplars, and I know each other, and it was kind of at my invitation that they're here tonight, and I think it was a bit appropriate since there have been some weather issues in other parts of the country where amateur radio, I think, has played some role in alerting people or keeping people aware of the situation. And we've had some severe weather in the area, tornadoes just down along the Mass border, so it's around us. So I think a few minutes with you two gentlemen would be helpful.
Stan, I'll get this.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, Town Council, I'm Stan Poplars. I live on Camelot Drive in Bedford, and I'm Vice President of the Granite State Amateur Radio Association. With me is Martin Kochel. He's the club secretary and also our public information officer. Our nonprofit organization consists of 60 members, old, young, male and female, and basically we promote the great hobby of amateur radio and also provide a public service. We welcome this opportunity to inform the council regarding amateur radio in Bedford, New Hampshire. Our purpose today is to briefly touch upon the hobby itself and also inform you of an upcoming event called Field Day, which will occur on June 24th and 25th of this month. Also, we would like to cover amateur radio emergency services and weather services in support of public safety. With that, I'll turn it over to Martin.
Okay, thanks. So, as Stan said, I thought we'd do very quickly, who we are, because there's actually two sides of the organization with you today. We're part of the Granite State Amateur Radio Association, as well as a number of us in that club are also part of the Amateur Radio Emergency Service. So we'll talk about that, some of the things we do, and as Stan mentioned, a nice opportunity to come see us in action later on this month, and then we'll have some time for some questions as time permits. So at the first level, the Granite State Amateur Radio Association, we're based here in Bedford. Stan mentioned it's about 62 people, monthly meetings. We hold regular radio exam sessions so we can get other people in the community interested in getting their amateur radio license, getting them up on the air and progressing through the different licenses they can get. With the old and new members, we have a lot of mentoring going on. People can help people get into the hobby and actually use the radio itself, and then how that can be applied into other things, between public safety, helping out in events or in emergency services. And then our annual field day exercise, which we'll talk about in a few minutes. The other half behind this is something called the Amateur Radio Emergency Service, or ARES for short. It's a national organization. It was funded in 1950 by the Amateur Radio Relay League, the ARRL. That's kind of the umbrella organization, if you will, in the U.S. And these ARES groups are typically organized by state, and we have our section manager in the audience with us, Al Schumann, so as we have questions later, we can get everyone involved. And then they typically go by county, depending on the size of the state and the municipalities being served. In the greater Manchester ARES, we decided that Manchester is so large, we carved Bedford, Manchester, Goffstown, and Hooksett into its own ARES organization. And the rest of Hillsborough County is then handled out by a group in Nashua. And a lot of that has to do with, we work closely with our local hospitals. We have CMC and Elliott here. Nashua has St. Joe's, and it'll always be Memorial Hospital for me. I can't quite get the new name under the belt after all these years, But the way the Greater Manchester ARES group works, we interface with the State Emergency Operations Center, and that's through the New Hampshire State team that Al leads up in Concord. We do weekly training calls, we do regular drills. As fate would have it, last year's drill was statewide, and that was trying to pretend we had a hurricane event and flood event back from 1938, where there was a lot of flooding, infrastructure went down, and here we are a year later, and we got lucky. We were missed. We're working with the American Red Cross. We're doing a drill with them this weekend to see if we can do communications up and down the eastern seaboard, so we can pass communications from Manchester to Nashua down to Washington, just so we know that that link works. So if the need should ever arise, we're practiced and ready to go. We also work with the local hospitals. I'll touch on that a little bit as well, but their operators are typically members of either one of the groups, and we help them make sure that their radio equipment is up and running. So, I was going to go back and try and figure out what's happened, recently, and just in the past couple of weeks and months, we've had the earthquake. We've had Joplin tornado. Just last week, we had Springfield. And, of course, our own personal favorite, let's not forget our ice storm a few years ago, where we lost a lot of infrastructure internally. And this is really the motto that's on the screen now for the amateur radio, particularly the Aries group, when all else fails. You've lost your telephone, you might have lost power. A number of us all have generators, so we can run our radio equipment off the grid. A lot of things work off batteries, off our cars. But even in some of the disasters we've had locally, cell towers may still be operational, but they're completely overloaded. Everybody's trying to get through. That makes them unusable. How can you get a message from one particular group to another, maybe from a shelter, saying if we've opened one in the high school, we need more beds, we need to get something to the Elliott, we can't get our normal radios don't work, telephones don't work, we can set up a center very quickly. That's part of what our field day exercise is setting up antennas quickly and efficiently and be able to pass messages back and forth, which is really the origins of the group, that radio relay league. That was meant to pass messages back and forth when other things couldn't work. So what do we do? And the bottom line is we're backup emergency communication support. We're not here to replace anything. We're here to help and augment. The town has really good infrastructure. You can see the towers out at the safety center. If for some reason something gets overloaded, they need help, we're more than happy to get involved. We actually get involved through the state level at the New Hampshire Department of Safety's Office of Homeland Security and Emergency Management. There's the New Hampshire Hospital Association. A number of us are Skywarn trained through Weather Service, so when there's an event coming, like just happened last week with the storm, an activation would occur, and we'd be asked to communicate directly to Taunton with what do we see happening. Because radar gives you a picture, but you don't necessarily know what's underneath that radar. Did something hit the ground yet? Did trees come down? Did the road crumble? Those are the kind of things, the feet on the street that can be communicated down there directly. Now, these days we can do that with cell and internet, but if everything went down, we can still use our radios to get down and get them live reports. The Red Cross we've already touched on. The other thing we do, and some of us may have seen recently at the Bedford Pre-Memorial Day race, we get stationed around at different parts of the track. So if there isn't a police officer at every corner, which typically can't happen, that person would be there to help provide some emergency support. Somebody fell or a car just ran through the barricade. We could radio back to the high school. They could get in touch with a local officer to go dispatch and take care of that. And most of the time it's who are the top three runners in the race, male and female. We're reading the bibs, and they kind of know how the race is proceeding, as well as the last runner just went by, and we kind of record the bib, and we just watch for that person to go, and we know we can shut down, and we can actually, close up and leave at that point. So the big thing that we originally were coming here for is our field day exercise. It's a nationwide exercise. It typically happens, as we like to say, the fourth rainy weekend in June, although last year was perfect. But it starts on Saturday, June 25th at 2 o'clock, runs 24-hour continuously through that Sunday, 2 o'clock. And we actually have people working overnight, because as the atmosphere changes, different radio bands open up for us and provides different ways to do communications. We'll be at the Earl Legacy Park, Log Cabin again this year, so it's a nice central location. Our setup's going to have a lot of typical emergency setups, if you will. Temporary antennas. We'll be shooting some antennas up in the trees, with open wire. We'll have a portable tower set up, some military masts that we can use to quickly get out on different bands and frequencies. And then it turns into more of a social event, be able to contact different people around the country to see how everybody's setup is working. We'll have different modes, people working on microphones, just using their voice to communicate. We have a lot of people still doing Morse code. It's no longer a requirement for the license, but it's actually coming back more in vogue. People are more interested now that they don't have to do it. Now it becomes a choice. As well as digital modes. We actually do digital traffic tests as part of Aries as well, so we can pass large amounts of information cleanly. I need 24 beds from this particular shelter, from this hospital. I have a prescription. I don't want to take a chance somebody might transcribe it wrong. I'd rather send it digitally and know that it went through. But it's still through a radio signal, and it just gets decoded on the other side. And then we have a special station set aside for anyone who doesn't have a license. So if you've ever thought about getting started, You can come on the air, actually give it a try. The picture up there is one of our members of the club, and that's my daughter, actually. She had never picked up a radio before and ended up with an affinity for Morse code. I don't know where that came from, but she enjoyed that more than voice. So you don't know what you're going to like until you actually get out there and try it. And it's usually a great time. We're all friendly. So we welcome you to come by and take a look. I know this was a lot of information. I have packets of the slides as well as some other brochures from about Aries as well as our local club. I'll leave those with Dawn so they can be picked up at the end of the meeting. But if you have more questions or there's more follow-up you'd like to talk about, here's all our information between Stan and myself locally for the GSARA, Al Schuman in the audience for state-wise areas and how we actually interface from the state down to different towns. And then I can get you to the local person within the Greater Manchester Areas team here. So with that, I'd like to thank you. Hope you come by and see us, and if you have any questions.
Norm?
No, I think it's a great presentation, though, and very informal.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
Has Bill Jennings expressed any interest in your activities from a learning point of view?
Yes, actually, there's two things. I've been working. I'm part of BCTV volunteer as well, so I try to do some taping I did last year, and I have to edit that now so I can make some public service announcements. So Bill has helped me get some of those on the air, as well as he's expressed some interest in, I think he called it low power FM.
That's where I'm
We're
going.
waiting for that license period to open up again, and he's actually working with another member of our group, Peter Storr, who's one of the engineers at WZID, and he covers the state from an information standpoint. So he's trying to keep us in the loop as to when that period opens up so then we can work with Bill and get the application process started. So it still seems to be on hold. We're waiting for the government to open it up.
Right. Good. Glad to hear that. Thank you.
Ken?
Do you work at all directly with either the Boy Scouts or the Girl Scouts and their communication badges? Do you have any interaction with them?
You do. You do. I'm a member of the Ralph's one of our members, right?
Got it.
Yeah, Ralph Dieter is one of our members as well as one of our others. Barry Whittemore is involved with one of the troops, I think, out of Manchester as well.
Good. Jason?
Does the GSARA or any of these other organizations work collaboratively with emergency preparedness with local police and fire departments or the National Guard or anything like that in the past?
Not directly, and this is maybe something I'll pull Al in with me as well. We're more activated at that state level when something comes up, but if there's a local emergency that would come up, they could certainly contact us directly and say, we need some help on the communication side. There's other teams that might be applicable as well. I know Bedford doesn't have a CERT team yet, which is also part of that civilian emergency response team that goes beyond just radios. So it depends on what the town wants to do. I think some of that discussion was on hold until a new police chief can be brought on board, and then that'll be started up as well.
Thank you.
Paul? Chris?
Well, it's reassuring to hear that you're out there. I was not aware of the extent of your presence. Could you just give an example of a common interaction you would have with a hospital?
Sure. So from a hospital, it takes two fronts, and this is more on the Greater Manchester Areas side. One, the local hospitals from, I think it's 20, I think, in the state roughly, they received a grant last year through the New Hampshire Hospital Association, so they all have radios. So I can only speak to CMC and Elliott. When they got the radio equipment up, the local Aries teams would go in there and make sure, A, that the operators were trained on it and that we were familiar with the equipment. So if we were ever to need to give them help, we go in there and we're not seeing a foreign piece of equipment because there's 3-4 major manufacturers and they're all a little different. It's kind of like your car. The air conditioning's over here, the lights are over here, and now they're switched on this one. So just enough so we know where things were. On the Elliott side, I went over and met with the person who's their primary operator there and made sure that they could pass traffic to me locally from my car or at home and then digitally, so they were all set up. And then they hold their own local drills, so where they'll actually pass messages between them that sometimes we get involved with and sometimes they don't, but they are definitely aware of us and we have, working relationships with those two.
Thank you.
Well, thank you for coming and visiting with us. I had some personal experience with radio out in Nebraska in their infamous tornado seasons out there, so I'd seen the value of this for some time, and I'll see you this weekend.
Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.